Probably the most formulaic of genres to come out of the 1980s was the buddy cop movie, and in this case the formula is about as simple as they come. Take two cops from different backgrounds with different personalities and force them to work together to crack a particularly tough case. They'll trade insults and barbed comments as they rub each other the wrong way, compete to see who's top dog, use their differing expertise and skill sets to solve problems in unique ways, and eventually they'll conclude that their differences actually make them a pretty good team. Beverly Hills Cop did it, Lethal Weapon did it, Rush Hour did it, Red Heat did it. Shit man, Last Action Hero even turned it into a running gag where cops intentionally get partnered up with their exact opposite. And by the 2000s, the fad had kind of fizzled out and people had moved on to new things. But one movie that doesn't get talked about nearly as much is Tango and Cash, a classic buddy cop action movie starring Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell as Ray Tango and Gabriel Cash, two of the top cops in LA, responsible for a string of high-profile arrests and drug busts. They're both good at what they do, but they're about as different as two men can be. While Tango is well-dressed, sophisticated and mild-mannered, Cash is down-to-earth, laid back and kind of a slob. Conflicting personalities? Check. Unfortunately, the success of the two men draws the attention of Perret, a criminal kingpin whose business is starting to suffer. Rather than just kill them and turn them into martyrs, he instead lures the two men into a drug bust gone wrong, framing them as dirty cops, and blackmailing the city's officials into testifying against them. Sinister bad guy pulling the strings? Check. Before you know it, they've been found guilty and shipped off to a high security prison together, where naturally the rest of the inmates aren't exactly thrilled to see them. It also becomes clear that Perret has men inside the prison itself, and intends to make sure they never live to see out their sentences. Their only option is to work together to bust out of jail, track down the men who framed them, and arrest Perret so they can clear their names and get their lives back. Particularly tough case that needs to be cracked? Check. Needless to say, this all involves a fair amount of shooting, fighting, explosions, one-liners, Kurt Russell dressed up as the world's least convincing woman for some reason, and a big old action-packed finale to take down the bad guys and save the damsel in distress. I mean, let's be real here, it isn't going to reshape your view of the world or redefine the human condition. The simple, formulaic plot manages to work in just about every cliché and convenience known to man. The characters are basic archetypes that adhere perfectly to the buddy cop formula, and the fight scenes are nothing that you haven't seen before. And yet, there's just something endlessly charming and rewatchable about Tango and Cash. It's like putting on a comfortable old pair of boots, or eating your favourite meal at a restaurant you've visited dozens of times before. You know exactly what you're gonna get, and that's okay with you. If I had to try and pin it down, I'd say a lot of the film's charm stems from the cast, which is absolutely top notch. Stallone and Russell were both experienced veterans by this point, and they've got great chemistry together. They bounce off each other perfectly and trade quips and insults like they've known each other for years. Some of them still get a chuckle out of me even now.
On the streets, this pig and his cop friends broke my ribs, my leg, and my jaw. You broke that jaw?
I mean, you can kind of tell that this is Stallone's party, and his ego starts to shine through at times, like maybe he comes out on top a little too often, but for the most part, the two leads are well balanced and given equal attention by the scripts. Jack Palance hams it up with the best of them as Perret. You can tell the dude's having a great time playing the villain, and honestly, if he had a moustache then he'd absolutely be twirling it. You've even got James Hong and Brian James as two of his henchmen, and a very young Terry Hatcher as Tango's sister. Although I'd like to point out that there's almost a 20-year age gap between Hatcher and Stallone, but yeah, sure, whatever. The movie clocks in at just over 100 minutes, which is actually pretty fucking impressive considering how much plot they managed to cram in. You've got the character intros, the drug bust gone wrong, the prison break, the revenge trip, the strip club, because of course there's a strip club, it's the 1980s, and the big action-packed finale. God only knows how long it would have taken someone like Zack Snyder to tell a story like this. You'd probably have to break it up into a fucking trilogy. The point is, it all moves along at a brisk pace without feeling rushed or glossed over. I mean, as long as you can buy into the idea that Tango's sister could have missed the fact that her brother's been arrested for murder, sent to prison and then broke out and went on the run, or that a precinct captain somehow has the authority to suspend a federal manhunt for 24 hours. The suspension of disbelief is strong with this one, believe me. What's interesting though is that Tango and Cash was actually a bit of a clusterfuck behind the scenes. The studio and creative teams couldn't decide whether they wanted it to be a grounded, realistic cop drama or an action-packed cartoonish comedy, so for a long time they kind of fluctuated between the two and wasted a shit ton of money in the process. The director even ended up getting replaced halfway through filming because they couldn't agree on what to do, but whatever. The end result might not be to everyone's taste, but for me, Tango and Cash is perfectly fine the way it is. It might not be the peak of cinematic art, but instead it's just a fun little throwback to a simpler, more carefree time in movie making. A film that reminds me it's actually still possible to do good things with well-worn ideas, provided you bring a little bit of passion and energy to the table. And well, sometimes maybe that's enough. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.